Blog Talk Radio.
What we see and what we think we know and believe. There are worlds. There are things that we cannot understand. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team is in charge of the field. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another night of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. And on the line with me tonight is Jeremy, King Sasquatch, Tim, King Gray, I, Mothman Poirier 1.0, and we are interviewing Michael Slade tonight, a Nevada and Utah Bigfoot researcher. And we'd like to just right now get things kicked off and we'll let the fun begin. Michael, could you give us a brief a brief synopsis of your background and how you got into researching Bigfoot and whatnot, just like a little biography type thing?
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Actually, first of all, thanks for calling or inviting me to come on. This is kind of fun. Be able to talk about something that's of interest to a lot of people, whether they know it or not, or they want to admit it or not. My interest in Bigfoot starts as a child. I grew up kind of in Fort Collins, Colorado, and my parents had camping spots they liked to go to up near Horsetooth Reservoir. And I think my dad must have been the first person to introduce me to the concept of Bigfoot, which led me directly to the library, of course, where I checked out every Bigfoot book I could possibly check out, which as a child of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old would immediately lead to nightmares of Bigfoot coming down out of the foothills and reaching in through the window of my basement bedroom and trying to snatch me away. So my fascination with Bigfoot started quite young as a child. My professional career, I'm a photographer. I'm a commercial photographer and fine art photographer, and have been shooting all over the world for the past 20-ish years in various capacities, mostly advertising. Most of my clients have been in the automotive industry, particularly in the outdoor or the off-road industry, four-wheel drive, backcountry sorts of vehicles, and have been on all kinds of expeditions north of the Arctic Circle, Mojave Desert, Death Valley, southern Utah, Nevada, Oregon, just anywhere in the West where there's vast, wide open spaces to go tromping around. A few years ago, I kind of changed my emphasis, got away from commercial photography, and started to be turn more inward and start to be more of a photographer of things that were personal, working on personal projects as diverse as North Korean refugees living in South Korea. I've been working on a book on the Great Salt Lake, Utah's Great Salt Lake, for the past 9 or 10 years. And in the past 2 or 3 years, I started a project it was designed to get me away from the west desert of Utah and more into the mountains and the trees and the forests of Utah. I needed a break. Photographically, I needed a break from the desert. So I decided to start photographing in the mountains, and one of the things that I had always kind of been curious about were these places where people had seen or had experiences with Bigfoot. or what they chose to attribute to Bigfoot. So I scoured the internet, and of course there's a plethora of information about sightings and what people have seen and what they've experienced. And so I started starting in my close proximity to Salt Lake City where I live, visiting some of these sites and these locations and photographing them, mainly out of curiosity, but kind of out of the desire to understand the locations where Bigfoot had been seen. One of the things that I learned very early was that Bigfoot really can be very urban in his locale. There are some sightings in Utah that are extremely close to the city, if not in the cities. Bigfoot can also be very remote and very elusive and take me to places that I've never even heard of inside of Utah, and I've lived here for the majority of my life. These stories have been very, very fascinating to both read, in the comfort of my living room, but also to take printouts of them into the mountains and, read them while I'm in the location where the experience happened. And this has satisfied my curiosity by and large for, what has happened to these people. It's also spurred me on to find more stories and to travel to more locations and to make more photographs and to then find more stories and travel to different locations and make yet more photographs. Probably been to 35 or 40 locations in Utah alone, probably 2 or 3 in Nevada. Plans for this winter and spring are to go to some locations in Wyoming and up into Idaho. So what first initially started out as a Utah Bigfoot project has spread, into neighboring states as travel and time allows me to find stories and to travel there. I'm starting to include those locations into my project as well.
So was your initial project just on Utah?
Yeah, it was. The project initially was let me back up about 3 months from the beginning of the project. I got on a website and was asking for the top 50 locations across the country where I could travel to and photograph the location of the sighting. And what I quickly learned was that there's no consensus where the top 50 sightings are, and for me to go to each one of those locations across the country would take forever and it would cost a fortune. So I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting idea. Let me scale it back a little bit and let me just do it in my home state. And I didn't really realize at that time just how many Bigfoot encounters or experiences there had been in Utah. And as I dug and dug and dug, I found that there were, literally hundreds that were documented, and have run into several people. People have come to me confidentially and have told me their stories and shared with me their experiences. And so, through word of mouth and through talking openly about my project, it's kind of grown back to the size where I kind of didn't want it to be, large amounts of travel, lots and lots of photographs, and somewhat of an expense.
So how many reports would you say come out of the Utah, Nevada area?
Well, the Nevada area, I kind of divide Nevada into half, the eastern half and the western half. The central Nevada, if we, think about Winnemucca, north and south, directly from Winnemucca, that's what I would consider central Nevada. Of course, there are lots and lots of sighting stories from western Nevada, Tahoe, Reno area. Quite a few sightings actually from eastern Nevada, which I would consider the Great Basin National Park, up into south of Wendover area and up into Wells, up north to the border with eastern Oregon. There are probably a dozen reports from along that stretch of the state of Nevada. I had heard and had read of several accounts that had happened in the Vegas area, Mount Charleston, and on to the Nevada Test and Training Range that had been documented. And before our initial contact, or my contact with Bigfootspad, I had never heard of the sightings that you had mentioned. You had corresponded with me about several sightings that I had not heard of.
Yeah,
so,
like the Blue Diamond Sand Yeti and all that, you mean?
I'm sorry?
You mean like the Blue Diamond Sand Yeti and all that stuff?
Yes, of course. The ones that I'd heard of predominantly were the sighting on the training range.
So is there a bunch? Is there a lot of sightings up by the training range, or is it mostly?
There's at least one, possibly two, that are documented. There's at least one that's well documented, and that's on my project blog. I've registered utahbigfoot.org, but that website has not been started yet. The domain has been registered, and it's just static for now. But my project is at utahbigfoot.blogspot.com, and the sighting report for the event that happened in Nevada is in the month of February, and it's titled Yucca Flats, Nevada. Mm-hmm. And the sighting was actually printed in the newspaper by the Associated Press. And as I dug more about this particular individual that had this sighting, I learned that he was an individual that lived in St. George, Utah, and was a member of the local church's bishopric. And so these are typically people that are used to being honest. They are held in high regard in their community as a pillar of the community, or a man in good standing. And this is something that shook this man so much that he reported it to the security facility at Mercury, Nevada, which is just northwest of Las Vegas. And
is that where they have by Indian Springs and all that?
Yes, it's just west of Indian Springs.
Well, as far as the Blue Diamond Sand Yeti, I was going to tell you a little bit about what we've seen and what we've done over the years.
Oh, cool.
Well, since we live in Vegas, so we frequently go up to the Blue Diamond area, like the town in Potosi. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Now, remind me where Blue Diamond is. I lived in Vegas for 2 years, and we lived up on the foothills of we lived on Farm in Decatur on the north side of Vegas, up where the new developments are up there. There's a brand new high school. It's at the base of, what's the mountain called? I can't even remember it now. Anyway, you know my neighborhood, and I would go drive up around those foothills all the time and wonder, what roads are back up there, and there really isn't much. So where's Blue Diamond in relation to this proximity of Vegas?
Blue Diamond is actually in Red Rock Canyon, like you're on your way to Pahrump.
Okay. Yep.
It's like that little tiny town up in the only town up in Red Rock. It was. I'm trying to think, because I'm not sure if you're familiar where the Red Rock Casino is. It's off of the 215 in Charleston, like right before your. Yep. Well, Blue Diamond is about 10 minutes up the road from there, like 10 or 15 minutes, because it's on the freeway. I'm trying to think of the name of the freeway. But anyways, so we've been called out to Blue Diamond on several occasions because there's been some sort of creature that's been looking in people's windows and. No kidding. So we actually were called up there several times, and when we've gone up to the area, there's been a couple of times where we've seen some pretty spooky stuff. Like, for instance, one time when we were going up there, we stopped to do some call blasting. I'm pretty sure you know what that is, where you play the call to try to call it in and all that. Yep. So we were call blasting, and we weren't getting any sort of replies. So we're picking up our gear, getting ready to leave to come back to Vegas, and suddenly we got a return call, but it was so close to the car that it sounded like it was almost right up on us. Scared us to death, and then. Anyway, so it scared one of the driver guys, like our teammate, and he got so scared that he tried driving away. He tried leaving me. That's how bad it scared him. And you got to imagine, we've been on probably about 20 or 30 different Sasquatch expeditions to like Oregon and things like that. Sure. And whatever was calling was so close and so loud, like I said, it scared him that bad. So we returned to the area the next day, and we actually got some footprints. It was right off the neighborhood. It was. I'm trying to think how to explain it.
Is it in Calico Basin?
Right by the houses that are bordering the desert, like the mountains or I don't know how you would call that. It's right off the path. There was footprints. We got 2 casts, but what
The only thing that was kind of I don't know how to say it, kind of disappointing was our footprint. Only two or three of the toes turned out, and the other half broke, which is kind of sad.
Was this in sand?
Was it what?
Were they print in sand? Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. And then
was there much definition to the tracks? I'm just curious because sand typically is hard to even take a cast from.
Well, there was one for sure track you could tell was a footprint. The other one was kind of sloppy. So we tried getting a cast of the nicer of the two, and then only part of it turned out.
Oh, interesting. How big was it?
I would say probably about 1.5 of a regular human feet. Like of a large human foot. It's probably about, like I said, like 1.5. And like I said, the vocalization was so loud that people start turning on their lights in their houses, start coming outside and everything to see what it was. It was crazy. And then, what else have we done over the years, Tim, in Blue Diamond?
Well, we've been there several other occasions because typically on a nightly basis they have the wild birds that come wander through the town.
Yep.
We know what they sound like. We've seen them dozens of times, and this was actually like a full-on screaming, like something like I've never heard that noise before.
Well, and it's pretty easy to spot a burro or a donkey braying.
Oh, exactly. But yeah, we've been on several occasions because I've heard Sasquatch vocalization, but I've never heard anything like this. This one sounded like it was the loudest I've ever heard. It was I don't even know how to explain it. If you ever listened to like Climate Fall recordings, like where it's screaming and
yep.
It sounded something similar to that, but even louder because we were closer to it.
And did you have any recording equipment going?
Actually, that's the only unfortunate thing is because we were out of the car and he was in the car.
Oh, and that's really funny. One of the things that I've started doing recently is I'm sure you're familiar with our friend Stan Courtney. He and I have corresponded quite a bit, and his audio expertise has kind of spurred me to investing in a piece of audio equipment, and I start taking that around with me as well. So it'll be curious. Now, when I go out, I'm afraid. I have to be honest. I'm afraid to see Bigfoot. I'm afraid to have my own encounter or my own experience, largely because I think of the fear from my youth, my nightmares and dreams from my youth. So when I go out, I don't really do any call blasting with any speakers or amplification. But when I go out, I'll do some whoops up the canyon or down the canyon or just in the area to see what or if will respond. And now that I've got this piece of audio equipment or this recorder, I probably will do more of that and leave it in place and let it run while I'm out photographing.
Well,
Blue Diamond, that's amazing. I'm driving through Vegas over Thanksgiving. I'll be driving through Vegas over Thanksgiving, and it would be wonderful to be able to go to this neighborhood and get some photographs of the area.
Yeah, we could give you directions or something, or draw you out a map or whatever you need like that.
Wonderful, and this is how I get my locations to go photograph. People will relate to me their experience, and I'll say, hey, do you mind sharing your information? And I've never had anybody say no. They don't want to share their location with me. They are more than happy to give me directions. In one instance, I've got a guy that really wants to go with me when I go. I've only been to one location with the person at the time, or I had the person accompany me to the location, and that just happened last month up in northern Utah. So that's something that I really haven't done, but kind of for logistical reasons or other things. But yeah, I would love some information about where I should go.
Well,
that's less than 3 miles from the urban sprawl of Vegas.
Yeah, it's close.
Way close.
Well, an interesting story I heard also was from the Valley of Fire. I don't know.
Northeast, yeah.
We know where that's at.
Yep.
But we got a report saying a lady pulled over on the side of the road with her grandson, and she said that she was looking at a bighorn sheep that was walking through a meadow or like a gully, and I guess she said that when whatever it was went down in the gully, and when it came back up, it was walking on two legs and started walking across the meadow or like the gully when it came up on the other side, and I guess she said that it started climbing like one of the sides of the mountain, I guess you could call it.
Do you have a location for that as well?
I know a general area only because I've been there once or twice. Like I know a kind of the area she's talking about, but I don't have the exact location.
And a lot of times that's what happens as well, is I'll get a general location. I like those kinds of reports because then as a photographer I get to just go and see what the area is like, get an impression about where I think it might be or where it might go. Paths that it may have walked, or terrain that or is convenient for travel. I can interpret it on my own, and sometimes those sighting locations I like better because then I get to be I get to have fun as a photographer. A lot of times they'll say 3 miles south of Scipio on I-15, and I go there and I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is incredibly boring. But that's the challenge as an artist. I hate calling myself an artist because it sounds so frou-frou. But as an artist, that's the challenge, to try and make an interesting image of a pretty boring location, which by and large, most of these places are. They're desolate stretches of highway in the middle of nowhere, dead trees everywhere, snow-covered fields, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, is there anything that you would like to tell Mike about some of the Sand Yeti stories and things that we've heard in expeditions we've been on?
Well, I live in Ohio, so I don't get to go out there as much. But the last expedition we went on was last Thanksgiving. I went with I accompanied the team, and we went out to Mount Potosi. I don't know if you know where that is. It's right near Diamond. It's what do you say about Jerry? About 5 minutes, 10 minutes up the road, maybe.
It's probably about 20 minutes from the Red Rock Casino. It's only about I would say probably 10 minutes from Blue Diamond, actually, where I was telling you we've seen the other, like the vocalizations. Actually, it's close by there.
On 159.
Because, yeah, I think it's off that. Well, is it?
Oh, well, Charleston Boulevard. That's 159. Yeah.
Yeah. It's as you're going to Pahrump. It's It's actually, when you go up there, it's actually more like forest up there, which is perfect habitat for Sasquatch too.
Yeah. Well, we went up to Potosi. I mean, we go up to Potosi from time to time to go UFO spotting, or we'll just do a Sand Yeti investigation because it's such a close proximity to Blue Diamond, and like Tim just said, it's got like a somewhat small foresty area, so and it's really remote, so there's a chance of being out there. And we went out there and on a Sand Yeti thing, and we didn't get anything. We didn't get anything interesting, at least pertaining to a Sand Yeti. When we got out of the car though that night, but when we got out of the car though, Tim and Jer saw a movement just as we flashed the flashlights on this dirt road, and we didn't know what it was, but we did a little trekking off of the main road and went off into the side brush, and we found some rather large mountain lion tracks. So that was pretty spooky.
You're being hunted by a cat. That's pretty nice.
So
very interesting.
Yeah, we
had a Sasquatch encounter that night, but we definitely had an interesting, exciting night that night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because,
very interesting.
Yeah, Nick now lives in Ohio, so he doesn't come out here as much, but me, Jeremy, and Brent, our other team member, we drive out to Blue Diamond every so often because we always get sighting reports, because there's a family there, them in particular, they always send us reports every so often to keep us up to date.
So do they call you directly, or do they email in, or what do they do?
Oh, They never call us, actually. They've always emailed us every time, or even texted us several times. Because, they're the family when we heard the vocalization, they were the ones actually turning on their lights and looking outside to look to tell us as if, like, see, I told you. Because we've been to Blue Diamond countless times, but like you said, sometimes we come up empty-handed, but then there's been the times where we actually do come up with, like Jeremy said, we actually had a full-on footcast, which you can't deny that. So.
What's interesting about these vocalizations, there's an area in Cache Valley along this river that it's kind of a river bottom area with tall cottonwoods and a little slow meandering, river. And I went to a sighting report out there. That was actually the first one that I ever went to, the first one that started the whole project, and spoke to this lady who had her experience, and she, in turn, was interested in what other people had seen in the area. And, of course, it was the talk of the town, and so everyone knew her and knew what had happened or what she had claimed to have happened. And so she found that up and down this river bottom area, the residents, for years, have heard unexplained screams and yells and howls and moans at various parts of the year. They come and they go. And so I'm convinced that this river bottom area is a corridor for travel, because if I look at the sighting reports in that area, they seem to follow along the river at times and get up into the hills, the foothills, and up into the mountains, where there's less of a chance to be seen by human beings. So one of the things that is on I have a list, quite a long list of things to do, places to go, and images to make. This river bottom area is an area that is of high interest to me, mainly because of the interactions with this unknown creature, but also because it's a very beautiful area and very scenic. So I think I have the chance to not only make a Bigfoot photograph or a photograph of an area where Bigfoot has made its presence known, but also I get the chance to make a nice photograph, visually.
We have a question in our chat room, actually. There's a guy that was asking, have you ever heard of any sort of stick formations, like in Nevada or Utah?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard of any. I certainly haven't seen any. One of the things that's been interesting to me is as I dig and read and people contact me, I learn about these different things that are kind of the topic of the day. These tree snaps now are what everyone's looking for. The sound blasting and the tree knocks were kind of popular to talk about a year or so ago. And so as I discover what to look for as I go out, my visual cues are broadened. I haven't now as I go out. I was just on a hike about 3 weeks ago, up in the foothills near the copper mine on the west side of the valley. And as I'm hiking along this trail, I'm looking up in the trees for tree snaps, 6 to 8 feet off the ground. So looking for evidence, and haven't seen anything like that yet. Certainly haven't seen any of the very, very fascinating structures where the bows are bent over and the little dome or teepee structures are built. Some of those, if I came on one, I think that it would, if I found something like that, I don't know, I mean, certainly I would take a photograph and try and document it, but that would be a little close for comfort, I think. Like I said, I am kind of nervous about having my own encounter. And it's maybe this is like, why we go bungee jumping or why we jump out of helicopters or airplanes, the thrill of experiencing life. Maybe that's why I'm chasing these photographs, putting myself in a position to have an encounter. Oh, one story I can tell you about that. I was in eastern Utah near Flaming Gorge Reservoir, and I photographed down in this really scenic gully area, and I'm by my vehicle, and I'm tearing down the gear, and I turn around and I go kind of over by this little overlook that looks down where this stream is, and this brush, and I let out some whoops, some really loud whoops. And about 20 feet to my left, there was this commotion and this noise and this big stand of juniper, and my heart just stopped. And I gulped and I looked over.
We have another question, actually.
Oh, go ahead.
Somebody was asking us, Could you explain a little bit about the Mount Charleston Bigfoot, or the Bigfoot sighting that you know of?
You know, it's killing me. I put it on my blog. I was in Vegas for about 3 days a couple of years ago, and I was doing my searches on the internet, and I read a story about Mount Charleston, about somebody seeing one cross a road, and I went up there and I photographed it, and came back and dagnabbit, I cannot find that sighting. I cannot find that report on the internet. And the ironic thing about that is I'm having more trouble finding that sighting report than finding Bigfoot itself. The sighting report is being as elusive as Bigfoot per se. One thing I do know is that I'm not going to drive up to Mount Charleston in the middle of a family vacation for 3 hours in the middle of the night to go photograph if I didn't think that something had happened there. So I'm convinced that there is a sighting on Mount Charleston that is on the internet somewhere. I just haven't had the time or the luck to find that sighting report. But it was, you know, I believe it was a similar one to everybody else, or to many of the other sightings where someone's driving along the road and they see a creature cross the road in front of them that crossed the road in a couple of steps in a flash of light. You know, that kind of a sighting. That's the sighting report I remember reading about Mount Charleston.
Well, Michael,
ironically,
I was going to ask you,
do you know if they're more aggressive in one state compared to like Utah compared to Nevada?
Well, you know, again, I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the Nevada sighting reports other than yours. Aggressive? I don't know if aggressive is the right word. I think that, I mean, there are many stories in Utah of them taking food off of windowsills, licking pots of burnt stew clean, stealing pies out of windows, that kind of thing. So it's very daring. There have been some very daring escapades, you know, things that teenage kids would normally be blamed on. The only difference being that there are footprint evidence or a physical sighting by the resident. I don't know if I've heard of any accounts being particularly aggressive, although I have to take that back. A friend of mine, a personal friend of mine, who is also an outdoor photographer, a wildlife photographer specifically, and also an avid hunter and a tremendous outdoorsman, he and I were actually photographing black bears in Alaska. At one point we had 13 black bears surrounding us, fishing for salmon during the salmon run. So they were surrounding us in an almost 360-degree circle, and we were both very, very kind of nervous, except for the fact that they were fat on dead salmon. He had an experience in northern Utah where one he is convinced was stalking him and making itself known in the bushes or in the trees just above him on the trail while he was out hunting deer one fall. And I believe his report contains rocks being thrown at him. That's the only report that I can recall of showing any kind of aggression. Specifically, I'm just kind of mentally going through the stories that I've heard. The idea of an aggressive Bigfoot, I mean, I know there have been a lot of bluffs and a lot of charges and objects being thrown and calls that the sighting or the experience reports chill me to the bone, quite frankly. And if that's not aggressive, I don't know what is. But I'm not so sure if we can say that a Utah Bigfoot is more or less aggressive than any other Bigfoot. Frankly, I think that there are a lot of them that travel around. For example, the Bigfoot sighting that I photographed on the Shiwits Indian reservations northwest of St. George, that could be an individual that had gone down into Red Rock Canyon or gone to Valley of Fire or gone to Mount Charleston. This is an individual that they would have a tremendous range to be able to, have at its disposal. So I'm not so sure that you can say that, Bigfoot respects a state boundary the way we do.
Oh, well, we also have a guy asking if, he said, does our guest work with J.C. Johnson, or have you heard of them, is what he said?
J.C. Johnson? Or Johnston? That's not a name I'm familiar with. That's no one that I've met. So I'm not sure if that's a Utah person. Maybe I should go on the internet and look at the chat room. I'm trying not to be too distracted. But no, that's not a name that I'm familiar with.
Hmm.
Well,
is that somebody that I should be familiar with? That's the question. Maybe that's somebody that I should be familiar with.
I'd say because I've never heard of him, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. There is a pretty active group of Utah Bigfoot researchers that go out quite a bit, and they do overnight expeditions, and they will do a lot of call blasting, and they have some areas that they consider very active as far as Bigfoot activity is concerned. I have yet to meet any of them in person or go out with them on any kind of expedition, but I've spoke with their informal group leader on the telephone, and some of the areas that I'm have been traveling to are some of the areas that they like to frequent as well. I would only assume that since Bigfoot, study is such a small world, that there will only be a matter of time before they and I kind of hook up and become friends. The one thing that
they're called the Crypto Four Corners Group, is what he was saying.
Crypto Four Corners Group.
Yep.
Well, that would be in the Colorado, Arizona, the New Mexico, Arizona area. There are quite a bit of sightings down there too. My father actually grew up in Red Mesa, Colorado, south of Durango, and so I go to the family farm quite a bit here and there, and so I've done research on Bigfoot sightings that are near Mancos, Colorado, and near Mesa Verde National Park, and up into the Blue Mountains, and areas where my dad, as a child, as a young man, herded sheep and cattle all summer long. So the area where my dad grew up and they ran their farm are areas where Bigfoot has been sighted and reports have been made. So, yeah, that Four Corners area, I know that there are several sightings from there. I didn't know that there was a group down there.
Well, I was wondering, so we have a question that they're asking, do you do any work with, like, spiritual things or UFOs or anything?
No, I try to, I'm trying to draw a line between a creature, a physical creature that's tangible, and a paranormal experience that is less tangible. I consider myself, quite spiritual, believe in God, those types of beliefs, Christian beliefs, but I'm trying to keep any kind of paranormal thing or aspect out of what I'm looking at or what I'm trying to experience. I know there's a large group.
Another question that I was wondering was, do you belong to a group, or do you just do all your research just by yourself?
I am an individual. I am what you would consider a lone wolf. I kind of relish that position. That goes back to possibly my journalism background of not being too close to any one source, trying to maintain journalistic integrity. Also, this Great Salt Lake project that I'm involved with, there are many, many different political factions, so to speak, that are tugging at the Great Salt Lake politically, and I've tried my best not to align with any one group so that I don't alienate myself from any of the other groups that are on the lake. And I've kind of tried to take that tactic as well with this Bigfoot project, where I can come and go from different groups as they choose to trust me and bring me into their circle of knowledge, but at the same time not getting so close to them that I exclude myself from interaction with anybody else. That's one of the things that I really have a problem with in the Bigfoot community, is that it seems to be very, very antagonistic. One group is against another group and is against another group, and very personality-driven, and lots of enemies, which is interesting to me because we are all, I think, interested in the very same thing, but there are some very deep interpersonal differences from group to group, which I have a big problem with.
Well, Nick, did you have any questions or comments for Michael?
Sorry for a second. Yeah, Michael, I was going to ask you, have you ever done any work in the Zion National Park area over in Utah?
Yes, and I know that you're not from the West because you call it Zion. You must watch The Matrix quite a bit. We like to make fun. We like to poke fun at people who pronounce it Zion because in Utah we pronounce it Zion.
Zion.
Zion National. Yeah, Zion. So if you're in Utah and you call it Zion, we know you're not from Utah, and you get lightly made fun of. And I only say that because when I moved to Oregon, I used to call it the Willamette River, thinking that it was French, and I was being all proper calling it the Willamette River, when in reality it's just the Willamette River. Anyway, that's a tangent. I like to go off on tangents. I've been designing quite a bit. In my career as a photographer, I have tried to stay away from national parks. They are visited by thousands and thousands of people every year. They are photographed to death. And as a photographer who wants to do something unique that not a lot of people are doing, I find that if I spend time, say, in Zion or in Moab or in the Grand Canyon or Bryce, Arches, those areas, I find myself just reinventing what other people have done. So I don't have a lot of experience photographing in Zion, although I've been through there dozens of times. I don't really stop and tromp around and photograph there. I think there are some sightings near Escalante. There's at least one sighting near Escalante, Utah, which is kind of southeast of Zion. And that sighting actually is interesting because that is a creature that was considered to be very, very pale or white by the people that saw it. And that's an interesting area as well because, like Nevada, southeastern Utah is extremely arid, not a lot of fresh water, not a lot of wildlife, certainly hardly any vegetation, yet somehow this thing is managing to eke out an existence out there. It's very fascinating to me. What was the? I'm sorry, I kind of went away from the question. The question was about Zion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I was just asking a general. You didn't work there, and I was going to ask you, have you heard of any sightings? But you already answered that question, so that's all good.
Yeah, Zion's a pretty rugged place. There are a lot of places, automobile travel. There are a network of roads in Zion. There are a handful of trails that people find very, very popular. But other than those roads and a few trails, Zion National Park, by and large, is pretty remote and pretty rugged. It would not surprise me if there was an individual or two in that area of Utah.
Well, we have someone named Minnesota Bigfoot Research in our chat, and he was asking you, what's your opinion on the Sasquatch DNA findings from Dr. Meldrum?
Dr. Meldrum is someone that I have not met. He actually just lives up the road in a few hours away from me in Idaho. He's someone that I've sent an email to once or twice, just general information. He's a busy man and hasn't been able to get back in touch with me. He's got bigger fish to fry, certainly, than some yahoo in Utah. If Dr. Meldrum finds something that is scientifically viable, then I would choose to believe him. Dr. Meldrum clearly has a PhD in various subjects that many of us are just now trying to understand. He is put under tremendous scrutiny by his colleagues as well as his institution to provide information that is sound. As a scientist, I can only imagine the academic pressure that he's under to provide peer-reviewed information that will hold up to the strictest scrutiny by a group of scoffers, by and large. So if Dr. Meldrum provides this information that he is claiming is legitimate, then my gut feeling is to trust that information and to believe what he's saying. I don't know specifically about the findings that the Minnesota individual is referring to or what the claims are, but my hunch is to take Dr. Meldrum at his word, absolutely.
Well, my personal opinion was, have you heard of any hair samples or casts coming out of Nevada or Utah anytime lately with your research, anything?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's quite interesting to me. One of the things that I've learned is that the Division of Wildlife Resources in Utah has responded to many incidents where people have called in regarding Bigfoot, and they are known, as a group, they are known to have taken casts of tracks. That database is not available to the public. That's a database of information that I have not seen, but this individual that I spoke to in Paradise, Utah, I went out to her location, spoke with her for quite a bit. She told me that the Division of Wildlife Resources came to her location, saw what she had to show them, took her report, and told her that they had had many various reports from all over the state. And they do casting. I haven't heard of any particular DNA or hair sample evidence coming out of Utah or Nevada, but other than the report of the DWR taking information from individuals and casting tracks, I don't know of any other information than that.
Well, somebody's also asking us, could you tell an interesting story that you've heard?
Yeah, I'll tell you the most interesting story that I've heard. A friend of mine that I actually went to high school with, well, there's two interesting stories from my youth, or that happened to kids that as I was growing up. I grew up in Cache Valley in northern Utah in a little town called Nibley. And a friend of mine, down the street neighbor, good friend of mine, he was my dungeon master as a teenager. I'm sure we all know what that is. He and his sister had an experience while they were up with their father cutting wood up Providence Canyon, which is about 5 or 6 miles away from our home, or where the neighborhood where we lived. And they were at the gravel pit area of Providence Canyon, and his older brother, teenage brother, and his father were cutting down wood, and so his younger sister and he went off in the woods traipsing around just to kind of, relieve their boredom. And his younger sister said that she saw a hairy figure. And this report is actually on my blog. You can read about it. This is the report is one that he gave to me. He wrote down after speaking with his sister about it, and this is after 25, 30 years. He hadn't spoken with his sister about this for 30 years or so. And so you can read his words of the encounter as he gave them to me in an email. But his sister said that she saw this large hairy figure looking at them, and Jeff felt the presence. He felt the influence of what was going on. This was in the fall, and you can read about it on the blog, but they had an interesting experience seeing the Bigfoot right there, and I don't remember him ever telling us this story. He was not believed by his father or his brother, and I think he was shamed, quite frankly, into keeping this a secret. Because I spent a lot of time with this kid, and if he had something that interesting to tell me, he would have shared it with me. And I subsequently went up and photographed this location at after hearing about his story. A story that I just heard myself this fall that happened in near Hyde Park, Utah, which is also in Cache Valley. A friend of mine from high school was hiking last September rather, with another buddy of his. They had their kids on their kid-carrying backpacks, and they were up in the foothills near the Mount Gog or Mount Magog wilderness area. And they went up a trail. They were hiking up a trail, and they got to kind of a dead end, and the brush got thick, and so they were forced to turn around. The trail had just got too overgrown. So they came back down, and they went over towards another area, and as they had stopped, and they taken their children off of their backs, and they were eating some snacks and whatnot. They looked back across the valley to an area where the farmers had farmed and plowed for hay fields clear up to the side of the mountain to the foothills. This is way, way up high and very remote from the rest of the valley, yet it's still a farmable area. And as they turned around and were looking across this field, they saw this very tall, very fluid, dark, bipedal shape run across the corner of this field. And I went to this location with him, and the distance that this creature covered was probably 35 to 50 yards. And Dave said that he saw it for only a flash of a moment, less than 2 or 3 seconds that it took to cross this uphill, sloping field and go up into the bushes, up into the juniper, and into the area where they had just been hiking back down, where the trees and the brush got too thick to hike up the trail. And I said to him, how do you feel knowing that where you and your buddy had your kids was possibly an area where you had flushed this creature out, and after you left, it was returning back to where it lived? And he said, I never really thought about it that way before. But that's the way I read his sighting event, is that they were hiking in an area that wasn't very frequented by people. They possibly flushed this creature out down the hill into this open field, and as they left the area, the creature felt that it was safe to go back up to where it had been before, and at that point, when it was going back across this field, exposed itself to being seen by my friend and his buddy. They were so shaken up by this that they refused to talk about it for months. Now, if this is a deer or a cow or a person on a horse, these are all things that people up there are familiar with. People in the foothills are used to seeing these things. It's open range, cattle graze all the time. So we're used to seeing these creatures up in the mountains. We know what they look like. We know how they move. But what these two gentlemen saw was unlike anything they'd ever seen before, and it rattled them so much that they wouldn't talk about it. If this thing we call Bigfoot isn't real, what's even more interesting to me is this potential psychological phenomenon that thousands of people throughout all generations of time and the world over have experienced in common. That to me is almost, in some ways, more exciting than the fact that there's a physical creature hiding in the woods somewhere. So both sides of this whole Sasquatch thing have me very, very fascinated. The possibility of it being a real creature is very fascinating to me. The possibility of it not being a real creature and us having a generational-wide, Earth-wide phenomenon shared by individuals removed by space and time is also very fascinating. It's one or the other. Possibly both. I doubt it's both, but it could be both. I'm leaning towards the creature tromping around the mountains, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, that story is probably one of the better ones I've heard, actually. That's pretty neat, though, like you said, especially your point where you said you may have flushed it out. That's a good way of thinking about it, though. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, we've heard similar stories like that.
The thing that's interesting to me is that all these people have very, very similar experiences, and none of these people asked for it. None of these people went looking for it, yet they're all having this very unique experience. And that's the other reason why I kind of don't want to have an experience, because if I have an experience, who's going to take me seriously? I'm out there all the time, tromping around the mountains, looking for this thing. Of course, one day I'm going to come home with a sighting experience. I think, quite frankly, the only person that will believe me is my wife. I asked her a few months ago, I said, if I came home and I told you that I'd seen Bigfoot, would you believe me? She said, yeah, I would. Other than her, I don't think anybody else would believe me, because how convenient would it be for a Bigfoot researcher to be out looking for Bigfoot and have an experience?
Oh, exactly.
The other reason that I don't want to have an experience is because I'm a photographer. I would be expected to provide definitive evidence. The camera that I use is very large, and it's very cumbersome, and it's very slow. And the exposures that I'm using are very, very long. So long, in fact, that if something walked through the frame during the exposure, it would not be recorded. So if I had an experience where I had a camera and I didn't come back with photographic proof, I would be taken as a fraud. So that's also one of the reasons why I kind of don't want to have an experience.
Oh, I get you. Yeah, because, I mean, same thing here. Our team, we've been out doing dozens of cases, and it took us, gosh, maybe 6-7 times before we even heard our first vocalization.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, and again, that's another thing too. You are expected to always come up with evidence, but it just so happens, most of the time when it does happen to our team in particular, because we've been in some pretty remote places, it takes you off guard. It'll be like when we're just sitting around talking, or
yep,
you're like ready to eat dinner or something, and then all of a sudden we hear something that's like, you know what I mean? It happens with my friends.
That's why Stan Courtney's work is so fascinating to me. He can leave his recorders out for weeks. He can be he's ready. He sets that thing up and he lets it go, and it's always going. The trail cam idea is also very interesting to me because, you put them in places, and the people that put them up clearly would know where game would travel back and forth. I'll be surprised if it's not a game camera that provides definitive proof, or like many people think, kids, making YouTube videos in their backyard. It's going to be interesting to find or to see who comes up with the definitive evidence. Another part of me thinks it's going to be a trucker that hits one on a freeway and kills one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left in the show. I was going to say, is there any last-minute links or updates or news that you would like to tell all of our listeners?
Oh, geez. Clearly, I would love it if people went to the website and read these stories for themselves. Once again, it's utahbigfoot.blogspot.com. From there, you can get my contact information. If people just want to email me, my email address is sladephoto, PHOTO, @yahoo.com. That would be the thing I would point people to the most, would be just the blog. Any news? I don't know if I have any news. One of the things that's interesting is in the write-up to the show, you called me a Bigfoot researcher, and I don't know if I'm a researcher or not. Yet at the same time, I guess I'm a researcher because I'm looking for stuff and I'm reading stuff and I'm taking reports and I'm writing things down. So if that makes you a researcher, I guess then I'm in the club. But any specific news? No, I don't know if I have any news. I have some trips planned to northern Utah, southeastern Idaho, into Wyoming actually even. Certainly I'm driving down to Vegas for Thanksgiving, and my kids are already asking me where we're going to stop and go take Bigfoot pictures. Tehachapi is an area that's very fascinating to me, east of Bakersfield, up in the mountains there. As I'm passing through Vegas, I would certainly love to spend a few moments over near Blue Diamond and get at least one image. So news for me really isn't news because I go looking for things after they've happened. I think if you want news, you have to go to bona fide sources like Dr. Meldrum.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because when you come out here, we'll definitely we'll point you in the right direction and everything.
Awesome.
But yeah, we thank you for being on the show tonight. And I mean, I'm sorry it was kind of short tonight. We just have a couple things going on in a few hours. So.
Oh no, that's totally cool. This is wonderful.
Yeah, because we'd definitely love to have you on again in the near future if you'd like.
Oh, sure. I mean, you might wait a year or so to have me on again until I can give you some more information or some interesting tidbits. But, yeah, that'd be great. I'll definitely email you guys when I get ready to come down.
Oh, definitely. We'll have to make it a little bit longer next time.
Oh, because you've learned by now that I can ramble with the best of them.
Oh, we could do that. Today's just a slow day. Yeah, Nick, did you have any last comments for Michael at all, or?
I was gonna thank you again for coming on our show, and it's just nice to talk to somebody. I used to live out in Vegas, so I am familiar with the area. So it's nice to just hear someone else has some familiarity.
I know what you're saying.
With the area.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, and I'd like to hear you back on the show too. And any amount of time, we'll see what happens.
Well, I look forward to it. That'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks again, Mike. We'll have to talk to you again soon.
Super. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Okay. Good night.